The Agenda is powered by DART, Delaware's transit service, moving forward.
Hi, this is Kerwin and welcome back to The Agenda. I've been promising you all season long and living up to our promise that we are having a power pack season this year here on The Agenda. We're bringing you representation that's ensuring that your needs, your ideas, all of the things that keep you and your family safe are being discussed right here on The Agenda. Today, there is no difference than any other week. We are fortunate enough, and I do mean fortunate enough, to have the treasurer, the state treasurer here, Ms. Colleen Davis.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Welcome to The Agenda. First time person here. We think, I don't believe that we had the treasurer on in previous seasons. I'm excited. It's the first time that we got a chance to meet and sit down and talk. But we know that you have an important topic here. I kind of want to brace the audience for what it is. I think what you're doing first and foremost in getting this legislation through, getting this idea through, because when I think about what keeps me up at night, as a 45-year-old person, it is my retirement, right? I think the age-old question is, will there be enough?
Yeah.
Do I maintain what I have now? Are my kids still going to be living with me? Do I need all of this? Like, those are some serious questions. And as our economy has changed, especially after 2020, we've seen just an influx of entrepreneurs, and ideas and things that we want, right? To keep America first, and these great ideas and these young folks that are saying, we don't want to do the traditional work environment. I kind of want to go out on my own and do things. And then there's smaller employers that have all the intentions of being bigger, but right now they just don't have what's necessary to provide certain things for their employees. And that's where your program, Delaware EARNS, kicks in. Right? I don't want to steal all your thunder, so tell us a little bit about it.
Well, you have it in a nutshell, right? I mean, I think the thing that is really interesting is that uptick in interest when it comes to entrepreneurship. So many universities are offering it as a track in their business school.
Right.
And so I think that tells you that there's truly an appetite for it. And again, I think when we think about our small businesses, they are the fabric of what creates our economy coast to coast. I mean, the United States is built on small business. And what Delaware EARNS does is it helps folks to prepare for retirement. The real structure of it is to help to close the wealth gap and to help to generate generational wealth. What we found in the midst of the pandemic was under the CARES Act, folks were given the opportunity to withdraw up to $100,000 from their 401k if they were impacted by the pandemic emergency. It was fantastic for a lot of people to be able to do that.
It was a lifeboat for a lot of people.
Yeah.
That couldn't make ends meet, that had children that were still, in school, or you were supporting families, and you may have lost your job due to the pandemic.
Right. Yeah. You may have lost your job. You may have been on the front lines and didn't have a safety net other than, that 401k. The problem is we found in starting to sort of dig into it that about 150,000 to 200,000 Delaware workers did not have a 401k offered through their employer.
Could you give me that number just one more time for our audience?
Yeah, so it was between 150,000 and 200,000 Delaware workers that did not have a 401k available to them.
Out of a state of 1 million people, give or take.
Yeah, it's a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And again, sort of further research, we sort of tag teamed off of the Wilmington Urban League's research that they had done the year prior, and found that of those individuals, we were talking primarily low to low moderate income households. oftentimes people who were on the front lines, who were delivering our groceries or helping to support healthcare and a variety of different jobs. But again, that didn't have any sort of safety net that was available to them through the CARES Act. And we just sort of said, we've got to do something about this. This is really important. And that's where Delaware EARNS comes in. It's available to any employer that has 5 or more employees. It is free of cost to the employer, and it allows individuals to go in and start saving day one, as we launch.
Yeah, I think what scares employers, especially small employers, is anything that's going to increase cost, right? Your wrap rate in regards to every employee, what is this going to do? So when the government comes in, I think when they see, oh, this is free, they're kind of like, define free, because nothing's really free. So, but you're telling us there's no cost to the employer for this. Right.
So it's a self-sustaining fund. Again, part of my responsibility, I handle about $11.2 billion portfolio for the state. That means it's across multiple different platforms. It includes retirement for state employees. We have about 39,000 individuals that are saving for their retirement under the state's plan. It's a very similar plan. We do this already. We said we can do this and not necessarily charge employers for this. So really we want to sort of go, okay, why is it that we have so many individuals in Delaware that don't have a 401k or some type of retirement vehicle available to them? It's not because employers don't want to have this sort of thing. It is a benefit that most would love to offer. It's just a matter of most entrepreneurs, as an example, are wearing 20 different hats. They're
every day, and sometimes those hats change.
This is true from one day to another.
Yes.
And so the challenge of just keeping the lights on is enough to sort of say, I can't take on another thing. I'm going to leave this for another day. And, after a while, that next day doesn't come. And as you said, before you know it, you're in your 40s and you're saying, there is a day that's going to come where I'm not going to maybe be able to do this type of work any longer. And that's where we want to make sure that everyone has the ability to save for their future.
So I'm also, I'm feeling this for the gig economy too, right?
Yeah.
So there's people now that are doing Lyft or Uber, and it's a part-time, what I like to call an old MBA term, a prime time schedule, right? But it is times where they could be putting monies aside themselves, and they've created a 1099 or an S corp for themselves, which they can then participate in. Is that correct? With this program?
Yeah, so Delaware EARNS is available to individuals that are sort of what you're describing. It's not required. So we do require that if you have 5 employees or more, that you're submitting your information and we're helping your individuals, your employees to save. There's multiple reasons for that, but it's not required for someone who has a 1099. It's one of those other things where if you're doing a side hustle and you're trying to make ends meet in that way, we want to make sure that you're not captured in a full-time job, for example, at an MBNA, which Bank of America, whomever, right, who already has a 401k set up for you. So we want you to be able to save, but we also don't want you to get in trouble from a tax perspective.
Right.
And the nice thing about Delaware EARNS is it is a Roth IRA, which means it's post-tax, which means as your money accrues, those
you're paying the taxes up front.
Exactly.
So at the time of, I don't want to call it award or release, but at the time where you can get paid,
right,
you don't have that tax burden liability that you would have with, say, a standard 401k.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And, interest will continue to accrue tax-free. But when you're ready to withdraw it, usually, hopefully, we're talking, 20, 30 or more years down the road, at that point, your tax burden is going to be less.
Right.
Yeah. So to your point.
And everyone loves that. You're sitting here and you're saying 20 or 30 years. 20 or 30 years. Can you imagine? I mean, it kind of scares me when I think 30 years. I think now, and the technology that we have, right? We're all going to be in relatively better health than, say, our parents were and our grandparents were. The likelihood that we'll be in our 70s and 80s and 90s still kicking, thriving, so to speak, is extremely high.
Yeah.
You know? So long gone are the pensions that people relied on and stayed in the same job for 30 some years, you know? And now we have to be more creative in regards to what we're doing in terms of our retirement. And then having the accessibility, right? So that's almost an equitable term to those type of accounts, right? And to those things, because that isn't always the case, right? Not everyone has access to those things. So I think it truly says something to your office and to the state where you're saying, look, we're going to knock down this barrier, this wall to ensure the generational wealth that you mentioned earlier in the segment. And have that, the only reason why you're not participating is not because you don't have access, but because you don't want to. Yeah.
Yeah. You're taking an active step to say, I can't do $5 a paycheck, $20 a paycheck, $100 a paycheck. And if that's the circumstance, we want you to be able to make that choice. And yet at the same time, we really want to make it as effortless as possible.
Right.
You know, but I will make one distinction, because you said long gone are the days of pensions.
Well, state employees. Okay. I apologize. I'll roll it back. State and federal employees are doing well. They have that option. But us regular folk that are out there that don't have that option, yes, like you mentioned that it's 39,000 state employees.
Yeah.
Minus, I mean, my parents are retired state employees enjoying their pension thoroughly. So I know that they're out there, but that is a small segment of the population.
Yeah. And dwindling, to your point.
Right. And some employers say, and they can't afford pensions anymore. I don't completely go for that,
right.
But that's the sentiment right now. What feedback have you gotten from businesses? What feedback have you gotten from some gig economy folks? Are people still a little skeptical about this? Or, I mean, you talked to Ivan and your team talked to Ivan about this prior, and I mean, we're just all on board here. We think it's a great idea, rah, 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 but is that systemic throughout the state?
I would say yes. So what's interesting, we actually just had a presentation we did earlier today to one of our chambers here in Delaware. And, you know, we've had their support from the day that we got this passed. They're extremely excited. Really, I mean, far and away, I'm trying to think of who wasn't excited.
Good.
So it's really been positive. I think what's going to be the true test is ensuring that we're rolling it out in the way that we plan to. We are actually prepared to have a pilot launch in the next few months. So
what does that look like?
So we have several sort of early adopters that are interested in jumping on board and being are sort of early through the gate. And what that looks like is they're kind of willing to work with us to see how we do and give us the feedback and make sure that we're sort of streamlining it. So the nice thing is, I'll just put a quick shout out to to our EARNS director, Ted Griffith, who's really done a phenomenal job. And the only reason that we're able to kind of launch a bit early is because of the way that he's really jumped in and made sure that we're carrying this all the way through to the end line. And, you know, basically, we want these early adopters to give us the feedback and to let us know how smooth are things, how can we do this better, and so that's been really, really important to have that partnership in the early phase.
What do you see this as? So like 5 years from now, like this can't be the final vision, or is it the final vision of what you want?
Yeah, no, I love that question, because I think what I see this as is we're sort of creating this culture of saving, right? And it becomes less of but I want to do something else with my money, and more of a, wow, check out how well my portfolio is doing.
I have a portfolio.
I have, right.
It might have been whether they've worked retail their entire life. They weren't doing this or that. They never had a portfolio before. Exactly.
And just, again, sort of, similar to what we've done with the 529 Education Savings Plan and our state employees, I want people to be able to kind of open up the site, look at it, understand that their money's accruing, what their rates are, and I want everything to sort of, again, be this really nice dashboard where they can see it all. But in addition to that, I want to also ensure that we're feeding people knowledge when it comes to financial literacy. So when it comes to the basics of, what is my credit report right now? Why is that important? And so we've talked about, in the process of rolling this out, embedding tutorials and educational material.
Could that all fall on the dashboard?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I would love. I mean, again, so my vision for 5 years from now is that people are empowered to make other steps in their lives that are extremely sort of, they're sort of that catapult into another sort of phase of security.
And then being able to pass that down. One, I guess, question that I would ask, maybe, I don't know if this is a geeky question or not, but so could they choose which funds within the IRA they want to choose, or are you just stuck on what the state requires?
So we have,
the state chooses for you.
Yeah, right. So we have a couple of options. The first is, again, to make it easy, accessible, don't need a lot of education to be able to save and to save well. We have a target date fund. And if you don't make any decisions, that's where it'll go. So if at 25 years old, you're tossing a little bit of money in there, we're going to make sure that it's in a risky but high return sort of blend. And if you are 55 years old and you're tossing some money in there, we're going to make sure that it's slightly less risky, but slightly less return, because you can't afford to lose that money. You're getting closer to that point where you might be retiring.
Clock's a ticking.
Exactly.
I want to rewind a little bit.
Yeah.
What made you say, what really, you seem very much as though you have a strong emotional quotation. You understand life. We talked about our kids. Sure. What was it about this that said this has to happen?
Well, I think, midst of the pandemic, we'll sort of put that out as the landscape.
But there was a lot of things that we wanted to do in the pandemic, right?
Sure.
So there was a laundry list of things that we needed to do.
I had a pony on there, Yeah.
But there was something about this program which I see is just an absolute good for a lot of people that makes your office move forward. I wish more politicians would see that or have that type of idea.
Well, I think most politicians' hearts are in the right place too. We all want to do good things. It's why we get into this world.
We're hoping they are.
Yeah, but I will say, and I mentioned earlier when we were talking, I'm one of 8 kids, and my parents were entrepreneurs. They were both well educated, but they decided that they were going to start a business on their own, and had a very successful business. And my father became ill. He had actually had a chronic illness that he was diagnosed with at the age of 19. And so throughout his life, cyclically would sort of fall very, very ill. It was really tough because he was considered to have a pre-existing condition. So it was hard for us to get health insurance for him. And in any case, long story short, my parents took on a business partner. At one point when my father was very ill, their business partner defrauded the company and we lost everything. We lost our home. We lost all of our savings. And it's those types of really critical moments where you think, where was the safety net? Where was that? We see people fall through the cracks all the time. And, when I think about it, I think, all right, there have been a number of things that have happened over the years that make us much more secure as an entire society. But this really hasn't been there. How do we continue to create a safety net? And through the CARES Act, it was a great opportunity to say, wow, people can pull from their savings. How wonderful. They're going to do it. They're not going to be taxed. They're not going to, face those fees. Super. But what about everybody else who didn't have access,
right?
Didn't even have the foresight to say.
But they still have the problems.
Major, right? And sometimes those problems are even bigger because they maybe didn't have the education, didn't have, some of the skill sets to fall back on. And so their window of opportunity as far as employment and economic opportunity is narrower. So why aren't we supporting those individuals in just access? I mean, this is, to me, it seemed very, very basic.
Yeah. And it's developing. We had another guest on last week that was speaking about financial literacy.
Okay.
And the legislation that he's putting through and how it's making Delawareans smarter. And when you're making Delawareans smarter, they're better employees, they're better customers. And financially, it's just a good decision for everybody involved. Right? And I think with the implementation of this dashboard, along with that, it is really going to give Delawareans that participate in this program a holistic view that they may have never gotten before, which is going to change, as I mentioned in the other episodes, the trajectory of their lives, right? So now when they're making decisions about, oh, I'm going to buy these sneakers, or I'm going to buy this, or I'm going to do this, things that have not been as important to the trajectory of their lives, they now can.
Yeah.
So I see this legislation as absolute good. That being said, and you don't have to name names, right? What pushback did you receive about this? Because what people need to understand, this is legislation. This is going to happen. This is happening.
Yes. So the legislation was passed, and so you're right, it is done. Our hope is always that no one comes along with additional legislation. However, we're getting this plan off the ground, and so we're in the throes of doing that, which is fantastic. I will say that more so than anyone, we received pushback from folks in the industry. So, from sort of larger personal finance individuals who are sort of reliant on
people coming to them to do this, right?
Right, and capturing businesses in particular and things like that. And one of the things that folks said was, well, you're taking business from me.
Not necessarily, because they weren't coming to you before.
Right.
That's just my common sense math, right? You weren't doing outreach, especially not to this population.
Right.
I know the financial folks. I know who they go after. It's just my opinion. They weren't going after these folks anyway.
Right. Well, and to be fair to those individuals, it's really, really hard to keep your lights on when you have, if your entire group of small businesses that you're working with are in the low to low moderate income household, you tend to need a much bigger group in order to do that. And most employers that are really large like that are already offering a 401k because they have people that are at the top tier all the way down that are interested in preparing for their retirement. And so it still didn't make sense. It was just as you said, it's really tough to to make that a go as far as a business prospect, if you're targeting the individuals that really haven't been targeted.
Right.
And so that's where I think it made sense for us to step in.
Oh yeah. And that's what, not only did it make sense, that's what we're depending on. And by I mean the citizens of Delaware are depending upon our government to ensure that they are on that agenda that, this show is named after, and looking for those loopholes, people who fall within, this is a used term, but the donut hole, so to speak, and can easily slip through the cracks. Like, we need our legislation, we need our representation in Dover to say, we need to fix this. So that is awesome that you're doing it. Just like so many other programs that have wonderful intentions, that are made for the people, and we're rah in the beginning. Sometimes the word just doesn't get out. Sometimes we push to a point and then it stops, and let's see if it flies, and it doesn't fly. What are we doing to ensure that, one, the word is getting out, and that people are not worried about participation?
Well, those are big questions. I would say the first one is we've worked really hard to build out a board of really invested individuals. So the EARNS board is comprised of small business owners, nonprofit leaders, and other folks that are in the community, particularly in a lot of the industries that where these employers are. And so that has been really good. And it's kind of been our first step. It's interesting because I think one of our very first meetings, we literally had almost the entire, almost every member saying, oh, there's also this community event, and oh, there's this newsletter, and things like that. So some of those board members are truly giving us that advisory element that's necessary to ensure that we're covering the community. That's the first part. I think the second part is, one, it's we joke around, it's a road show. So I'm up and down the state. As I mentioned, Ted Griffith is up and down the state. We're ensuring that we're making connections with chambers and folks like that, whose membership really cares about this type of stuff. It's a great hub for that. And then the other piece is, aside from the word of mouth, we're also focused on rolling out a full marketing campaign and ensuring that people know where to go, how to get there, what to do. And then, we're also relying on Department of Labor to make a lot of those connections with us. We're working together with them, so that we can ensure that we're targeting individuals and employers in that way by sharing information. And then I would say probably the other thing that we have that is extremely helpful is we've established a multi-state compact. And so that means that we're sort of learning from other states that have done this type of thing, what's worked, what hasn't worked, why, how do we make it better? So those are the big things. And coming on to the agenda with you is
problem
sort
solved.
of the, exactly.
Problem solved.
Exactly.
The phone's going to be ringing off the hook.
I hope so.
So do I. So do I. Treasurer Davis, thank you so much for coming on tonight and bringing this information. I think you're going to be extremely successful in regards to this. I think that there's going to be a lot of Delawareans that are going to benefit from this. There's going to be a lot of employers that are already being asked by their employees, what do you have in terms of my retirement? And they don't have an answer, right?
Yeah.
Because of the cost. You are now, I think, saving their grace in regards to this too, and allowing employees to stay on that job, right?
Yeah.
That and keeping money when they could go run the PA, they could run the Maryland, they could run the Jersey, and maybe find another job there, but they're staying here in the state. I think you're on the right track.
Thank you.
I definitely appreciate it. Thank you. I hope this isn't going to be the last time that you join us
too.
here on the agenda. Now that the door is open, and I hope that it's not the last time that you join us right here on the agenda. The clock is ticking, folks. Retirement will be here before you know it. Delaware EARNS is a great program. We're going to put the web address on the screen. You can reach out to them, find out more information, not only as an employee, but an employer. This is something to help both parties involved and to help you. Again, we're ensuring that your future is on the agenda in Dover, in Wilmington, and all over. We look forward to seeing you next week right here on the agenda.